Straight at the bat, we are seeing Patapan on the Sombra position, which interestingly usually goes to Apudo, who's on the Brigade of this time around.
Speaking of things Apudo usually does, Alone Fills is rolling out on the May here. This is something Talon themselves have played a lot, so let's see if they can beat their own strat, basically.
The good news for Talon is on first rotation, they've already made it past this wall. Seeing the next wall come through is going to be very important. Isolating Muse will be key to gameplay here.
Queen goes down, and Xavier, unfortunately, already in full retreat. So that initial gambit with the May just hasn't quite panned out for them. And with that, Talon just kind of get free positioning around this point.
And I think for Talon, in this specific matchup as well, you don't have the regular 3-3 GOATs composition. You have the Sombra variety. There's a little bit more flanking involved. There's a little bit more positioning involved for Talon, where it's not like they just want to play directly into a normal 3-3 mirror. In a normal 3-3 mirror, if the May was here, this would be a very favorable matchup for Xavier Esports, but as they've already lost one fight, and now re-pushing in with the May, it's going to be quite difficult.
They also tried to take a shortcut up here to position quicker using the wall. Not everyone ended up on it, so they ended up taking the long rounds anyway, and I mean, it was just a disastrous setup. This has already been a huge time waste, and now the actual push in, Apudo is low, but Talon's got a lot of ultimates to lean on.
And it's a much more open area for Talon to be able to escape through as well. You can see a couple members got caught in front of the wall, but safely now back on top of the point itself, reaching nearly 40% there. Earthshatter nearly available. In fact, Earthshatter is available for the side of Muse. Gagora nearly on the grab as well.
Xavier's still just gearing up to push into this, right? Let alone potentially win the fight. Nano Boost going to come out early on to Muse. They're looking to try and make the play. Nice stun on Queen, allows the extra damage to come through. And Patapan escapes with a sliver of health, so no kind of counter trade of any variety. THK goes down. 45% of that was free. Another 10 from another fight win from Talon. I mean, this is just the golden start.
And both teams have a decent, I would say, a decent result from that fight. More so on the side of Talon, right? Because they play a nano boost, they win a fight off the nano boost, preserve all the other ultimates. But for Xavier as well, they only lost 2 members, decently reset themselves as well, kept the rest of their ultimates, and now re-pushing into the grab.
The only problem is Patapan does have the EMP. They have found Muse early though. Queen barely getting topped off by the there. That was really down to the wire, but they have finally found their inroad, and not a moment too soon as well. You could easily see a world where Talon just win that last fight and end up taking out the map, but nice cleanup on Gagora. Not going to allow Talon any kind of cheeky comeback mechanics. Just going to get onto the point now.
Super cleanly repelled there. Both teams had a lot of ultimates to play. Both teams basically had 5 ultimates. Xavier nearly on 6, but as soon as that first grab came through from THK, they landed on Muse. They got that first pick through. Not enough defense to keep them alive. Patapan being the next member to go down. Well, that's your kind of re-entry that you really need for Talon. You want to be able to combo up the rest of your ultimates here. Graviton Surge didn't do enough because Transcendence was used, so Patapan needs to stay alive. He has to use the EMP, but because he went down, it doesn't happen.
Tay plans that perfectly. It was a good shatter across from Muse, though, so Alone Fills does still go down, but that's really all Talon had to work with. Xavier are a little bit ahead on some other ultimate charge here, notably the grab, but Talon's managed to muscle the point off them. Suddenly Xavier find themselves up against the wall with only a shatter to work with. There's a nano boost on Muse. He deals so much damage, and with the sound barrier as well, there's no just DPSing him down before he mows through your team. That's going to be Talon closing out the first stage of Nepal.
And I'd say Talon, off the back of really, really clean early gameplay, they got 40, 50% for free almost. I wouldn't say for free, but they got it without too much trouble. Again, only using the nano boost,
really.
Only really, you know, going past the initial neutral as well, early cap, everything kind of working out their way. Both teams having to come up with a lot of ultimates later on. Surprising fight loss for Talon. You would have almost have expected them to hit 100-0 had they had won that fight, but Xavier managed to clutch one through there. Just didn't quite have the resources later on to continue pushing on through, as Talon already were sitting at 95%.
Now we're going to see what these teams decide is the way to go for Sanctum, because Talon are hovering over a Winston, looking like they will commit to it, and Xavier, I mean, they're running exactly what Winston wants to spot coming out the gates.
I will say lineup is strange for Talon, because if Apudo is just playing the Brigida, you would, again, normally see Bashful in the exact same position. So I do wonder if Apudo has a bit of a trick up his sleeve, and Talon, so far they're ahead, and Xavier, they're putting the tricks out.
I mean, usually the trick is something like a May, but has been Xavier doing that so far. You're right, them really pulling out the tricks so far. Talon are a tricky opponent. There's the segue. And luckily Xavier, oh no, there's the stun on Queen. I was going to say luckily didn't lose anyone yet, but once again, Queen is the first casualty of the opening skirmish, and this one is already looking like it's going to go a lot worse for Xavier, at least back on Village. They only lost Queen in the first fight. This time they're going to lose 3 whole members.
And it's going to be a quick respawn, change up on the composition as well. Queen's immediately going to go onto the Winston. Do not want to be pushing back on with Orisa. THK as well, giving up the 91% charge on the Dragon Strike to go onto the Zarya. So they want to play a bit more standard. Talon now, they have controlled the point. They played it super quickly, directly into the bunker, gave no space for the Hanzo to work with. It was a decent amount of damage from Xavier, but not decent enough to win a fight.
Now Xavier just inherently on the back foot, at least for the next fight or so. Patapan already has grab commits, and very quickly actually, and they do find Tay in that, but Talon are going all out on this fight. That is 4 whole ultimates committed. I mean, granted, the rally is a bit of a quote-unquote freebie there, and the fight does pan out, but that's actually exactly what Xavier wanted. They now come into the next fight ahead.
Yep, and they're going to be able to use all these ultimates they've been banking up. Queen, notably, has been able to get a Primal Rage in the space of 1 fight. He came into this engagement sitting at 0% charge, so really decent charge up by him, and this is going to be a very important fight for Xavier, one they're expected to be able to win.
Self-destruct tossed forward though first from Gogora, just to see if they can find a pick on that or maybe split up Xavier, but they managed to steer through it. Now they are ahead in this fight and ahead in ultimates. They lose THK though. Lucky trade. They get that one with Patapan. I should say lucky. It's all skill. And what's also skill is CQB finding his counterpart with the boop. And with that, Talon are just going to sit pretty and steer clear through this fight without having to really commit ultimates and without Xavier really committing any either.
And that's a real problem for Xavier because we talk again, this is meant to be the fight they were supposed to win. They had the clear advantage in terms of resources. They used the Transcendence, took enough damage to probably warrant a sound barrier as well. Tay decided not to go for that one. THK slightly off the Graviton Surge, so timing just wasn't quite there.
But here is that grab finally. There is the sound barrier from CQB. Self-destruct is placed in a little awkwardly from Alone Fills. This fight isn't even
cap percentage
points. That's the thing that Xavier are going to have to pay attention to now. They will get some boots on the ground there, but
boots off the map.
That is absolutely devastating, losing V as well. Coming into even this fight, Xavier was still ahead in terms of ultimates, and now they're only actually even in terms of members. As Patapan commits a grab, they'll find Bello. The cap comes through for Xavier, barely, still trading back and forth, but Talon might just be able to hold on to this anyway.
And the tempo is still in Talon's favor because they have members coming back in. CQB is cleaning up more and more kills. Apudo now on the Doomfist as well.
There is the flight there for Gogora, so he's not just going to go off the edge. Alone Fills, on the other hand, will get D-Max thanks to a stun. Apudo goes down. That's decent. Tay finally finds a bump off the edge, and then they finish off Patapan. It looks like Xavier are actually the ones that are going to barely pull through this fight. They just have to wait out Gogora's self-destruct.
And Tay ends up living as well. 3 kills in the space of that engagement. They managed to hold on to it because it's a drawn-out fight as well. It's 33% on the board for them. They are heavily behind still, 1/3 of the way to getting 99% themselves. Talon now forcefully reset, used most of their ultimates, are going to need to go into a bit of a rebuilding phase. Unless they can get some early pickoffs, they're not expected to win here.
Which they honestly might just do. By the way, Xavier have had to back off because Bello had to go back to change to Brigida. It's a very early Transcendence. I think a smart one, a good tempo Transcendence. Queen was getting low, and they are able to find a pick during it as well. So this is a lead and advantage for Xavier. They just want to muscle Talon further and further back. But Talon right now, retreating with no further casualties.
And that's the thing, waiting for Apudo to come back in, not losing anyone else, maintaining the ultimates that they are, still building up Patapan on the grab. Tay is going to need to be able to counter this one with a sound barrier. Both teams have equal ults to use, slightly less equal now.
Lone Fills is self-destructed in a troublesome position, stops Talon from pushing onto that grab, but it's after the grab has run out that Talon have more to work with the sound barrier and the Transcendence. They push out and absolutely mow down the tanks of Xavier, who honestly just have no recourse.
Tay,
As
okay.
they say that, Tay is looking to single-handedly rescue this one, and it's going to be hard to keep him on lockdown, trying to finish off THK as well as Patapan ends up down. Now Muse and Xavier barely holding on to that off the back of some stunning playmaking, and now they are the ones pushing 99.
Yeah, I think they might get this one as well because Talon do not have feet on the point. Tay may have single-handed, I say single-handed, still a team effort, but when you've really come to examine where the key pickoffs came from, when you start to really think about, okay, what turned these fights around, because Talon, for the most part, they were in the lead. They were winning those engagements, and then suddenly Tay gets a couple kills in a row. 2, 3 kills in a row that really puts Talon off, forces them to reset, and in a place where you're already at 90%, you suddenly lose 3 to Tay. That's unfortunately your game over.
And the reality is, Xavier have also done the groundwork up until that point for it to have that sort of impact. Maybe you do that when you're only at 50%. Yeah, it's impressive, but Talon would still have time. The fact is, actually, Xavier did a good job of, once they capped the point, getting as much percentage out of it as possible, that they put Talon in that situation where they are one unfortunate play away from losing the map. So now we end up tied up.
And I do want to mention CQB here as well, that we see him on the replay. He was also very impactful at the early stages of Talon, when they were getting themselves up to their own 99%. He was good. Right now, he's probably still good because Tay is bionated and dead.
Yep, you got to keep a lid on that guy, is what Talon walked away from the last map with. Yeah, they did catch the early biotic grenade, goes down. So again, Xavier lose the opening skirmish by losing their first member of the fight, and Talon get to start on the point.
And that's what we expect from Talon, to have these strong neutrals, to have these really strong individual members that can make these plays. But I want to talk about compositions as well, because Xavier entering Shrine have the exact same comp. Both teams playing the Rhine Sombra Goats.
This is where you would kind of expect Patapan to just outplay Alone Fills. So I suppose it'll be a good litmus test, really, but how good Alone Fills really is at filling Patapan's boots on Xavier.
And so far, Muse has gotten the early shatters, so that's what he's got again. Gogora's taking on Bello as well.
Yeah, it was a decent shatter, really nice connections. They're able to clean up those supports, and that just leaves these tanks as sitting ducks. Basically, just great big ult batteries for Talon. They're going to finish most of those members off and charge up some more ults.
And you see, while that's happening, they're playing a bit of a 5v5 on the point itself. Both Sombras were off to the side of the health packs, and Patapan's keeping Alone Fills busy. If he doesn't keep Alone Fills busy, what you can imagine is he gets a hack onto Muse, and suddenly that shatter's invalidated. So yeah. Talon making sure they've got all their game plans well rounded out. They know exactly what they need to be doing to be able to win these, already up to 50%, and now nearing further ultimates that will push them even further on.
And Shrine is just starting to look more and more like Village, where Xavier lose the first fight and end up further and further behind the 8-ball here. You don't see as much potential for comeback as you did on Sanctum, so Xavier getting pushed in upon with that nano boost onto Muse, which also helps them charge up more Earth Shatter, but they survived this one.
And that's a decent retreat from the side of Xavier. Okay, they survived the nano boost, that's decent. But what the nano boost does give is puts Muse back on another shatter. Queen's about to get his first Earth Shatter. Muse has already lapped him, and now comes the grab.
That's a really nice bait out of the Transcendence, which can't even save those bionated members. So Patapan, who's been sitting here lying in wait with that EMP, doesn't even have to commit it. That's going to be used for the next fight, where Tay is going to have to really come through.
And we look at Alone Fills as well. He was sleeping for that fight because Mango Giant landed the dart on him. And you need to see this person get the EMP, be able to commit these. And for Xavier, running out of time here, it's coming up to 99.
Tay has to jump to the point just to force overtime. And now actually EMP comes out first from Alone Fills. It's a good one, but where's the follow-up? Even with all these ultimates, they finally get a shatter on top of it as well, but that was sound barrier, grab, and shatter, and EMP. And even then, they're still not necessarily closing out the fight. The counter EMP from Patapan, finding some trades coming through. Bello for Mango Giant, not favorable, but they find Patapan as well. And Xavier might have just been able to hold presence here. Muse doesn't want to give it up that easily, though.
And Talon need to be careful, because last time on Sanctum, this is where they got punished. They lost too many members, used too many ultimates, had to reset anyway. And as we can see, they are trying to back out of this fight.
Xavier barely scratched their way into that, but my goodness, it was expensive. They used every ultimate they had at their disposal.
And this is where, okay, you got grabbed, you got shattered, you got EMP. For Talon, you can make the decision. Give up these fights. You've already seen a huge commitment out of Xavier. You got the time to work with. You can re-engage. Seeing them overcommit into losing fights like this means it's costing them their retakes.
Gogora's grab here could, and indeed should, be highly impactful, especially with that hack on D. He can't just throw out a biotic grenade to keep Queen alive.
Or the nano.
That's all they really needed there, exactly. Or the nano, really anything at all. Shatter out from Muse is brilliant. They should be able to finish off a good chunk of members here, and the sound barrier just to make sure nobody goes down as they're committing to the fight. And Talon, again, this is looking like Village. They get it up to 99%. Xavier do grab it back, but Talon ultimately win that final fight.
And thankfully for them, it doesn't look like Sanctum, where, again, they overcommit and they end up losing. This time around, they're going to secure the 100% cap to secure the entire map as well, putting the Talon up at 1-0 on the scoreboard. And even towards the end, you see the brilliant individual plays coming through. Really compliment Patapan on his manual hack choice as well, knowing that, okay, the person to really save Queen is going to end up being, you know, the Anub with the nano boost and also the bionade combination. Both would have probably been used there. So you take them out of the equation, you already have a grab, that's what you secure it with, and Talon now get to walk away from that one feeling pretty decent, but somewhat scathed in the sense that I think Xavier taking one of the rounds and also doing some of the some damage on the other rounds as well was a good enough early shot.
Yeah, what it is, I would say, is Xavier are continuing to show their aptitude here, right? They're continuing to show they're showing why we are considering them as a top 3 team right now. But what we're also seeing is why they're not second or first in that top 3 just yet. Because even though they won Sanctum, I would actually say there weren't really many points in the entirety of Nepal where Xavier looked like they were going to be the team that won it. Even in that fight actually on Sanctum, it didn't look like Xavier were going to be able to win it until Tay got that incredible double kill. Now, I said it at the time, that was impactful because they had also played well enough to do the setup for that to have that kind of impact. It's not just a one-and-done kind of thing, but the reality is Xavier always looked on the back foot. Yeah, and it's also a part of the game where you have the capability to have some impactful environmental kills, specifically on Sanctum, so players like Tay can really put their, really show what they're made of and kind of give Xavier a bit of a leg up. So once you start to move away from those types of rounds, then you start to get into the position where, unfortunately, not going to be the case, but maybe another opportunity for Xavier is about to head onto map number 2 now. Will be on the Assault game mode. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Welcome to Hanamura. This is Assault. 2 teams face off as either defenders or attackers. The attacking team has a limited amount of time to capture 2 objectives. First A, and then B. To capture an objective, the attackers need to stand within its range for a set amount of time. Defenders can delay capture progress by also standing in range. To resume capture, the attackers must force the defenders off the objective by any means necessary. If successful, they score 1 point and gain additional time on the clock. Now the fight moves to objective B. If even one attacker is on an objective when the clock runs out, the game enters overtime. This extends play indefinitely until either team is cleared away. The round ends when the attackers capture both objectives or when time runs out. Teams switch sides each round. Whichever team scores the most points wins.
And Assault this time around will be going to Paris as the next map, and we talk about, okay, maybe Xavier can make a bit of a comeback here. 2-1 or 1-2 score rather for them is decently competitive, but then you look at the context of it as we've discussed, maybe it would have still been reasonably, it was still basically Talon favored overall, so a lot of question marks on the side of Xavier and how they're going to fare going into map 2.
Yeah, it looked like a 2-0 that just happened to turn out as a 2-1, but I think what is fair to say in among that is exactly what we were saying at the top of this matchup, which is Xavier do still seem to have some issues on control, and they do look better across the other game modes. In fact, that was where last week it looked like they were going to be able to win versus Nova. They lost control, but they picked up both Assault and Hybrid very handily, so maybe that will be a trend that continues tonight for Xavier.
Right away, we do already see a Bastion setup with the Orisa, also with the Winston. This is something that we've kind of grown used to now in the coming weeks, where you have a second main tank on top of the Orisa, where you do expect Muse to be quite mobile here. He should be hunting for backline pressure against the side of Xavier.
They've spotted it. Alone Phil sees what's up. THK goes, McCree's not going to cut it. So they want to roll out here on a Sombra Goat strictly, and I find that interesting.
More of a dive now because they've got the Hammond out, they have got the Genji out now as well, so they're going to go for a kind of half dive, half spam composition where you have multiple avenues of success here. You can dive in with the Genji Sombra, you can also spam out with Bella on the Pharah. And you're just seeing how now Talon wants to be able to respond to this one. Specifically, if you look back at Muse, he's the one that has to put a lot of pressure on the offense to stop the game plan from being fulfilled.
This does also help prevent Patapan and Mango Jai from just getting super charged up on all those ultimates. Xavier have a lot more flexibility in how they engage. Oh, sleep on Muse, but Aputo finds Thea, and you've got to call that one even, especially with the sleep on Alone Fills actually, and suddenly they just get mowed down. And That's the other thing against this comp. You make one little slip and suddenly you get mowed apart.
And it's not just Muse, by the way. If he works with Apudo, the two of them can dive on the same targets. This is how you can secure hacked out members from Apudo and where they can start to get this EMP up quite quickly, which Apudo is definitely doing. 80% versus the 47 of Xavier. THK now moving onto a Hanzo. They're very much doubling down on the spam comp rather than diving.
And I do kind of like that, but they do have to be careful inherently in how they position it, especially now that Talon are coming up on things like that enhancement field. Yeah, that's what it's called.
Amplification matrix.
Ah, you know what? That's better. That's probably
a little bit more accurate. Padman down's a big deal, though. There's no mercy on the side, which means no res, which means Apudo has to do a lot of work now.
That's an incredible pick by Bello to actually thread that needle, especially when you consider things like the immortality field, the amount of healing that could have come out. That's a bit of an oopsie, and now the EMP out of Apudo, only finding two members, and immediately he gets picked off by one of those members. They do find Bello, but unlike Talon, Xavier have a res available on their team. Losing V is a bit of a tough break for Xavier, but he did at least get the nano boost off first. Now Muse just kind of grasping at straws, swinging his hands in the air. Can't find these airborne members as Bello able to channel the rocket barrage. That is so brilliant onto Bello, but they're still able to get kills in the rest of the fight. Now the EMP out from Alone Fills to help secure what should be the final stretches of this fight.
And they should be, you're right, they should be able to take this, but there's still respawners coming back through. Muse is still alive. As they clean up Tay, there's not going to be a second resurrection, so very even trades across the board there. But Talon, because they lost their members earlier, they got those same members back earlier as well. Adapan changing over the Torbjorn now, knowing that, okay, resetting up the Sebastian, probably not going to happen in time. You would still give Xavier a bit of a leg up here. They have the closer respawn distance, and Padapan's not yet in the fight.
I think Xavier honestly weren't expecting those Talon members to come back to the fight. They got taken completely by surprise. Great dive onto Muse there. The immortality field barely saves him, but unfortunately in the time it takes to finish it off, like you said, Queen did go down. THK is doing some work though. Needs to be very careful.
It's still really even. Look how much pressure Muse can put in.
Wow, barely didn't kill THK, I should say. CQB had to finish the job, but this time it looks like Xavier are off to a far more convincing win, and I don't see Gagora just keeping this point alive long enough for the respawners to come in like what happened last time with Muse. So finally, second time's the charm, Xavier will cap A.
And you could argue that Xavier were meant to cap this one the first time around, or the first time it looked like they're going to be successful. The fact they only did so with about 30 seconds remaining means they're well below par of what should have been expected. 4 minutes and 20 rolling into B now. Can they actually cap this one? If Apudo lands a good EMP, the answer would be no.
But then, hey, maybe that's the difference between these two teams. Talon can turn what looks like a success for the opponent into enough of a failure that they end up slowed down. And now we're seeing a similar thing here. They roll in with more ultimates, but Queen is so low he has to roll out. Tay gets picked off. Alone Fills dies on the front line, and it doesn't matter that they got a couple of picks in among that because Talon are the closer respawns, and Xavier have lost way more members.
I gotta say, THK has been playing phenomenally on this Hanzo so far, but unfortunately, not gonna be enough to take B. It's one thing to go onto A, get a bunch of kills to give yourself a player advantage where you have the respawn advantage. Going into B, it's the complete opposite. You now do not have a respawn advantage. It's the defense team, and if Padpan's hitting shots on the Widowmaker, and the rest of Talon are able to pick up those counter trades, even with THK now getting his own counter trades, Xavier have to reset. That's the entire momentum gone. 3 minutes 25 now, and just a nano boost.
And it's an even bigger reset than that. Like you said, they have to make the compositional swap. The nano boost is nice for charging up other ultimates though, you will give them that, and they nearly have an EMP, which sometimes can be enough on its own, especially
I will
if your opponent doesn't have ultimates.
And that's the thing, Talon don't have anything, so if you can use the nano boost in here, you combo that up with the EMP from Alone Fills, maybe then go into a shadow with the nano boost, that's how you can still win B, but it will be quite a tough ask.
Again, Padapan really knows his targets. He's keeping pressure on B specifically. Now finally going to commit the nano boost. Trying to get some work done on the front line. They do push some members back, but Mango Jai's there with the healing for the time being. Now the EMP has come out, and it's a very good one. Queen Hacks, though, is huge for the counter trade because that actually hamstrings Xavier's ability to deal damage, and he was so close to an Earth Shatter that would have all but guaranteed to connect. So excellent target selection again out from Padapan and Talon. They're rewarded with an EMP that will find them a much more successful engagement, even if it's only a small bit of kills. It's an advantage in terms of overall numbers.
So now that Queen's reinforced, so this is very quick from Xavier because he wanted to clean up more members, force a full reset. Really looking at the shadow now. If Queen can land this,
There it finally goes, but nice grab. Quick fingers by Gagora. Does at least slow the follow-up, and in that time, they've managed to make a one-for-one trade just when you thought Talon would...
Oh, Muse.
This is so massive. Alone Phils does look like he's finally managed to get the connection they need, but Muse could still keep the team in it at this rate. And again, they have a respawn.
Free shatter.
Nice shatter out onto the backside. Didn't quite catch Queen in it though. Tay does end up dropping, and Xavier, all these respawns have come through for Talon. Xavier have lost all momentum now as the kills start to mount once again.
And we indeed have seen multiple ultimates being expended by Talon Esports and nearly couldn't see the comeback if it wasn't for the fact that you popped the nano from Mango Giant onto Muse, kept them alive long enough for him to see that Shadow Queen going for the suicide charge, and maybe he can get this pin onto Muse. Maybe that gets him that kill. Maybe that prevents the Shadow coming through, but that's not going to be the case, at least not this time around. They still get 2 ticks though, so you would say overall successful push by Xavier, but they don't quite have the ultimates when they need them because you're heading into potential last fight territory, last minute remaining. You do have an Earth Shatter coming out, but not much else just yet.
And you've got to deal with Patapan's EMP. He's got a great position for it. That is a brilliant commit. Huge follow-up. Instantly diving onto Queen with the stuns and the damage. They drop Bellow. They drop...
They're going to reset quick.
They might have one last shot at this if they're fast.
If Alone Phils dies here, that'll be really, really bad for Xavier. And now you're in a space where, okay, Talon, they have an Earth Shatter. They have about a nano boost as well. They want to commit very, very quickly. They want to force an engagement that is away from the cap itself, such that somebody from Xavier must actually compete for the cap while the fight takes place away from the objective.
And I'll tell you what, if Talon had a grab, they could probably do that without too much issue, but unfortunately they don't. They'd have to do it with a shatter, and that's maybe a bit too risky. So instead, Xavier get to set up, they get some positioning.
And this is where Xavier, okay, they really should be capping here with the kind of ults they have and with the advantage on the objective. 2 ticks, remember.
It's a pretty good connection, but they're again struggling to get that follow-up shatter out, though. That is what you've been looking for all game. Queen does get put to sleep, but he kept Talon off the point long enough for the cap to come through. Came down a little bit more to the wire than I think Xavier would like, but I would say really that's the skill of Talon more than anything else.
And I also think, okay, this is the sort of the part where Xavier capping through the entire map. They had a reasonably rough go at A, but along the sort of B engagements here, there was just that one in the middle where you look at Talon where they have this player advantage. They use EMP to kind of push Xavier off and try and clean up these retreating members. That's when you see Queen reinforcing with his team, and that's when you realize you have not forced this reset against Xavier yet. You don't have all your own respawners. You haven't fully deployed your defense successfully in terms of positioning. Xavier's now in position to re-push in. They've maintained tempo. Queen does land his shadow. Queen does end up doing a decent amount. And for Xavier, they get 2 ticks, and they do so much off that one push that by the time you get here and you're relying on Muse to kind of save the day, you've already put yourself in an unfortunate position where Xavier, despite not having a lot of time left, have just the right amount of resources to actually finish the map.
And again, it maybe reminds you a little bit actually of Sanctuary on Nepal, in as much as, you know, it's not just the one hero play, it's the fact that one hero play was enough to secure the map because of earlier work done that was good work. And that's something we keep seeing out of Xavier, if we're honest with ourselves. But again, to speak to the other side of that, you have to look at this and go, against so many other teams, that first one from Xavier would have actually been the successful one, both on A and B actually, but Talon are not most teams, and instead they push us almost to a double overtime.
What I gotta say is Alone Phils has been getting some really nice connections on his own EMP plays, and we've complimented Patapan for his manual hacks, but for Xavier, it's because they've been getting these decent EMPs, which has been shutting down the majority of Talon, that they can really force these engagements to go their way. And they haven't necessarily been strictly winning off just those kind of fights. It's been roughly even, but how the dust has been settling and how they've recovered from that sort of even neutral state has mostly been in their favor. And going to this next defense, Xavier starting out on a very similar type of defense. In fact, the same members.
Patapan already finding a kill. Gagora finds one of his own. I mean, it's night and day, right? This is Talon on their first push. Compare that to what Xavier accomplished in how many pushes was it? 3, 4, 5, maybe more. THK finally trades one back, but it gets rezzed, and Xavier massively on the back foot here.
The important news is THK's life. That's got to be the player that you can't afford to lose. And as a reminder, Talon did lose their Bastion, so it is also different in that regard. So Xavier definitely still in as long as THK is effective.
They do have to keep on the points, but there's THK getting the work done. Finds CQB as well, and that's really the big one. The Immortality Fields just keeping him alive as well for long enough. And Talon nearly took the point out of their noses, but yeah, this is unnecessary.
I would have preferred to save this one, at least for a potential retake, and not having this ultimate is going to hurt them later on down the line, especially now that, very similar to what we saw on B just before, 2 ticks taken, which is going to affect how the objective is being approached, because if Talon just want to play for objective, Xavier has to respond straight away.
Talon are the ones coming in with ultimates here anyway. Nearly got an EMP, nearly got a Dragon Blade, nearly got a Rocket Barrage. Any one of those can completely destroy the Bastion.
And Talon want to actually play conservatively here. They don't want to use all their ultimates, they want to use a couple, win that fight, then snowball B.
Matapan takes some heat, backs off. Good catch onto Muse to finish him off, and Talon have already committed some ultimates in, but can't quite finish off THK with the Immortality field up. I speak too soon as he does end up finished off now. Barrage comes down, finds Bello. The counter EMP from Alone Fills gets nothing done. And Talon just kind of walk on in, press the buttons, and the fight just works out.
And this time around, okay, Xavier had some ultimates. Both teams basically expended everything. Talon felt that they've used EMP as well. We want to respond. Gonna pull out the Graviton Surge. They didn't actually combine their own EMP with the Dragon Blade. They want to see what was going to work. Can you get away with just EMP? No, well then you now have to stick in the Dragon Blade as well. Getting THK down doesn't have the tank farm. That's a much easier deal than it would have been.
Yeah.
And now Xavier have the opportunity to try and get a snowball going, but understanding that they don't actually have any ultimates online anyway, they're going to make the quick swap. Xavier have also made the same swap, and we have a mirror again.
And that's the thing. Talon can also partially just use extra ultimates because they know they're going to swap. They play point guard on Patapan, keeping him alive. Oh man, barely alive. That's actually huge for Talon. That saves a lot of time.
And you're looking at who gets the first ultimate in this next fight, because it's basically a neutral. Aputo's at 70%. If he stays alive, connects that EMP, this should be the snowball completed.
That would be a really great ultimate to utilize as well for this push, especially when your opponent doesn't even have ultimates you're cancelling. You just get so much free value out of it.
Speaking of free value, they're already pushed on top of the point.
Oh, Queen.
Xavier have lost so much space, and they have been bionated.
Oh, Tayan's up down around the side. A little bit unfortunate, caught on the wrong part of that. And yeah, already 2 now. Xavier just have to push into it, and they know they're going into an EMP. They know they're about to look at an exposed reactor core, but they've got to charge in anyway. And Talon, well, I'm not going to continue that theme because it gets a bit gruesome. They're going to have no trouble dismantling Xavier on the defense. And look at what the difference is going to be made in the time bank.
This is now going to be, if I'm not mistaken, a case where best case scenario for Xavier will be a draw, and you really have to, once again,
0.6 of a second, so they do get given the minute.
Oh no, absolutely correct. So just off the back of getting it just before the overtime. I thought they did go into overtime because it was so close. But you're right. They've given themselves the opportunity. It's a very small opportunity, but one they'll be glad to take. And you sort of look at how this last engagement happens, where again no one really had ultimates. The first one came through from Talon. Obviously, they had the EMP nearly charged up, and then they got everything else as the fight went on. But off the back of the EMP, Alone Falls got slept. As he came up from his sleep, he got manual hacked. He was just not ever given the opportunity to build up a counter EMP or get a counter hack in there. And for Xavier, they had no other game plan. They got themselves pushed out of the point super quickly as well, which is why you saw those first 2 ticks come in. Queen couldn't repush in. He was bionated. So many things went so right for Talon, so wrong for Xavier, that they just vacated the point and gave it over.
But you know what? That's the difference between those things happening when you are on the defense and when you are on the offense. For Talon, they were able to do that to Xavier when Xavier were attacking. But when that happens, you just reset an attack again, and it was enough for Xavier to eventually break through. If you do that and you're attacking, it means you get a 5-minute time back.
And when you look at this defense as well, when there's only 1 minute to attack this kind of defensive setup, it's going to take the entire minute just to get past. In fact, it usually takes far more than 1 minute. So without a doubt, it's going to be a very, very difficult push for Xavier. They would be lucky to get 1 tick.
They're going to have to get a massive pick. They may just try and play for the point, but again, you've got someone like Muse there. His entire job is to prevent that possibility.
And they're going to play quad DPS like Talon did on their own offense, and THK this time on Widow instead of Hanzo. I was going to say THK was the core player last time around that got those opening picks. He's going to do so, but he's going to have to do it on the other type of sniper.
More than half their time gone as well. They're not really close to any ultimates. They haven't got enough damage onto any of these members. There's just too much healing, too much shielding.
Time is going to run out though, and then Xavier must push in, and once they do, they have to push into both Muse, but more importantly, Patapan.
And that's a nope, and they can't quite get that same free positioning on the point, but then, again, Muse's entire job is to prevent it, and he has done an incredible job at that. Tay gets one lucky conk, I should say, onto Gagora, and Queen will finally find Patapan, but that is only just before finding his own demise. That's the full hold for Talon. 5 minutes and 14 seconds to get only a third. This map is all but in the bag.
And this is where you look at Talon and you look at the way they're playing the composition, their mastery of the teamwork as well, and knowing what their roles are, playing this double main tank on defense on this bunker. And you're still kind of scratching your head, okay, why put the Winston here? But it's an adaptation to the fact that most teams will play multiple DPS members, 2, 3, 4, versus a bunker. What happens when there's a lot of DPS members, not that many supports, not that many tanks, is if you're using on the Winston, you jump on somebody, they're probably dead. So he's going hunting for those members, and he's getting those kills, 3 of them on that defense.
This is so classic as well for Talon, because you talk about that 0.6 seconds, it buys Xavier a minute. If it hadn't been for that, they would have only been defending, not allowed to give up even a third. The reality is, though, that advantage doesn't mean anything, or not advantage even, that opportunity doesn't mean anything against a team like Talon, because they can just destroy that minute. Xavier might as well have given up the extra 0.6 of a second on their original phase, and just capped in overtime. It's no difference, right? And I think still just having to defend.
Yeah, and we're now back in the position where, like I mentioned, they were going to be in a draw-only scenario. That scenario has come to light now. This is exactly where they're at. But also at the same time, I think most teams would have struggled in that 1 minute. That is a very difficult comp to break in a single minute, and Talon have 5 of those minutes to do so.
That's the reality. That is the difference. This is what Talon have set themselves up for. We also saw them last time playing for the points, except
Bella's already in trouble.
Queen's made the... he's gone over onto the Winston as well. Wants to try and pull the same mileage as what Muse did on the defense.
Yeah, and his key targets will be players like Patapan and Pudo as well. Gagora's in that mix, and you're now looking at the damage. In fact, the point pressure should be equally important. If Talon really want to kind of just dismantle this defense, they should be attacking the point while they're spamming and sort of redirect the attention of Xavier, because Xavier cannot afford to not look at this cap when it's only 1 tick.
I mean, that's what happened last time. They ended up giving up 2 ult ticks, really, before the fight on the point actually happened. Challenger sort of pressured it out. They're really moving slowly on this one. They're more just entrenched, trying to outspam the Bastion.
And you actually see Queen here playing bodyguard on the point itself. He's not playing the sort of hunter killer that Muse was. He's kind of playing more defensively, but while that's happening, Pudo found a target.
Oh, Gagora goes down on the other side of that, and CHK finds CQB, the immortality field. Very crucial there. Patapan slept is nice. Looks like Talon.
Lone pills.
But no, Mango Chai is still alive and going to be able to get these last few members on the point. And honestly, that kind of came down to the wire, but at the end of the day, what Talon had on their side was time, and it was time they used to charge up ultimates, and it was ultimates that won them the fight.
And I don't even know if it really came down to too much of a wire, because if Talon even get pushed off that cap, which I don't think they would have been, they could reset so quickly. The respawn is so close to where the cap is. They can get back there so quickly. They only need 1 tick as well. It almost seemed like it was impossible for Talon to lose in that kind of scenario. And unsurprisingly, we're now sitting at a 2-0 lead. And in some ways, a quick 2-0. In some ways, a competitive 2-0, because it's 2-1 on Nepal. A time bank that existed on Paris. Not too much of a time bank, but we got there.
What we're not seeing, though, are those places where Xavier do seem genuinely ahead of their opponent in some capacity. We're seeing them, you know, maybe run sort of even, but we're never quite looking at this going, yeah, this is doable, this is feasible, maybe they're ahead, maybe they, you know, we're not even really looking at situations where you go, well, maybe if this had happened slightly different, maybe if this had happened slightly different, there's still a fairly reasonable gulf, and I think that's expressed no better than the fact that by this time against Nova MS, they'd at least won a map.
And I think I will say to counterpoint that is there's been one moment where I would say Xavier had been ahead, and they were kind of rewarded for that, which is actually capping out B on Paris to get to the time bank in the first place. The 0.6 I won't really care about. The 1 minute didn't end up making a difference, but it's the fact they got us to a time bank at all, because in most cases, you wouldn't have expected the time back to come in, and probably it shouldn't have, but I think Talon made some unfortunate mistakes there where they didn't quite get certain cleanups, and Xavier did quite well to reset and maintain momentum super quickly as well, to regress on the point, have the kind of objective control to get themselves 2 ticks and put themselves in a winning position where you did feel like, okay, now this should be Xavier winning. Talon have put themselves behind for one of the few times in the series, and maybe it'll end up being the only time in the series, but gives you a little bit of hope, but it's only a little bit of hope so far. We will be going to a bit of a break here. When we return, we're going to continue with our opening match of the week here, Talon Esports versus Xavier. Who's going to win? Find out right after this.